Mr. President, I do appreciate the opportunity to join with my colleague Senator Moran from Kansas to speak in support of the bill that is before us, H.R. 3606, the Jumpstart Our Business Startups or Jobs Act. The Jobs Act is a bipartisan bill. It passed the House of Representatives by a vote of 390 to 23. It's also been endorsed by the White House. Small businesses are the engines of our economy, but government red tape is currently preventing these businesses from creating even more jobs. This common sense bill would enable small businesses in South Dakota and across the country to better access much-needed capital so that they can make investments and add additional employees. There's no reason why it should not receive similar support here in the United States Senate. Creating jobs, Mr. President, should be one of our top priorities here in the United States Senate. We owe it to the American people and to small businesses across this country that are counting on us to do something that will make it easier, less expensive, and less difficult to create jobs. Too often, Mr. President, what we see coming out of Washington, D.C. are policies that put up obstacles and barriers and impediments to our small businesses, making it more difficult and more costly to create jobs. We see that daily with regulations coming out of many of the agencies here in Washington, D.C. The senator from Kansas and I have been on the floor previously talking about regulations proposed by the Department of Labor, 85 pages worth of regulations that would, in a very prescriptive way, tell farmers and ranchers how young people can work in their farming and ranching operations. It is amazing to me the level of detail to which those regulations go and how prescriptive they are with regard to something that has historically in this country and traditionally been very much a part of our heritage, and that is the young people going up on farms, being involved in those farming and ranching operations, making them profitable. And we've got a federal agency now that thinks they know better. And so these 85 pages of regulations come out and suggest that there are certain things that young people on farms and ranches should not do. Not only suggest them, say they can't do. Can't herd cattle from the back of a horse, can't work around grain bins and stockyards, can't work with animals that are more than 6 months old, can't work at elevations or heights more than 6 feet. These are all things that the Department of Labor in their infinite wisdom has determined that they know better about farming and ranching operations in this country than do the people who work there. And it really would transform the way in which family farm and ranch operations are conducted in this country. And it does put additional costs and barriers up to these farmers and ranchers who work so hard to make a living. They really are the quintessential small businesses in our country. They work hard, they've got a tremendous work ethic, they are people who make their living on the land, and all they simply ask from their government is that they not impose these types of barriers and regulations and impediments to them doing what they do best, and that is to feed the world and to create a strong and vibrant farm economy here in this country. And so the jobs bill that is before us today, Mr. President, takes us in a different direction than all the regulations I just referred to, which make it more difficult and more expensive for people in this country to create jobs and to grow their businesses. This package of bills that came over from the House of Representatives, which, as I mentioned, passed by a vote of 390 to 23. There were only 23 dissenting votes in the House. It was an overwhelming bipartisan majority in support of this legislation. And it's because these are such commonsensical things, so commonsensical that the White House has endorsed most of these bills, if not all of these bills. And they passed in the House of Representatives individually before they were packaged into this particular piece of legislation that was sent to us here by that 390 to 23 vote. They were passed individually by huge votes. There's a piece of legislation, a bill that was passed in the House of Representatives that Senator Thune has the companion bill here in the Senate to, that passed 421 to 1. We had one of these bills that passed in the House of Representatives by voice vote. And the legislation, the bill that I have that's a part of this package, passed in the House of Representatives by a vote of 413 to 11 last November. That also is included in this jobs bill that has come over to us now from the House. So what we want to do is make it easier for the small businesses, which literally are the engine and the backbone of our economy, create most of the new jobs in our economy, to do that, to create jobs, to invest capital, to put their capital to work, and to make our economy grow. And so I would just say by way of introduction, Mr. President, that I hope that we can not only get to this bill, get on this bill, but move quickly to pass it through the Senate and get it on the President's desk, because we don't have a lot of time to waste. We all know what the statistics are in this country. We know the high unemployment rate, the chronic high unemployment rate that we have seen, the sluggish economic growth. We need to get this economy growing again. We need to make it easier, not harder, for small businesses to create jobs and to get access to capital. And many of these bills in this package, the small business jobs package, really do focus on the issue of capital formation and allowing small businesses in this country to have easier access to the capital that will allow them to grow their companies and to grow jobs. So, Mr. President, what I'd like to do is, my colleague from Kansas is here. As I said, is someone who, as a member of the Senate Banking Committee, has been a leader on this legislation, on many of these issues, and a leader, as I mentioned earlier, in fighting regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., that make it harder and more difficult and more expensive to create jobs. And in particular, as I mentioned earlier, we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago with regard to these Department of Labor regulations impacting family farms and ranches, just one of many regulations, the proliferation of regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., that consistently are overreaching in terms of their impact and what they do to create additional burdens for our small businesses.